You casually ask your new coworker about their Friday night plans, expecting something exciting. Instead, they mention an early night, crocheting, a little Netflix, and bedtime before 9. Wait, they're already in their early bedtime era? You look closely at their face, surprised. Okay, their skin is layered under heavy foundation and it isn't looking the best. And they've definitely had some work done. Late 30s, maybe early 40s? Then they mention their upcoming birthday. They're turning 24 next month. How is that possible? Why do they look and act so much older? Today on the Infographics Show, we're going to investigate the question media outlets and older generations have been asking for years. Why does Gen Z look so old? Born between 1997 and 2012, Gen Z should still be in their youthful prime, with most of them between 13 and 28 years old. You would expect them to look fresh-faced and youthful, but as many people both online and in real life have noticed, that's not exactly the case. One reason Gen Z might appear older comes down to styling. They actually know what they're doing. Scroll through TikTok and you'll find high schoolers expertly executing hours-long makeup routines, complete with contouring, layers of foundation, and concealer tricks that would make a celebrity makeup artist proud. Most millennials and Gen X didn't even know what contouring was until they were full-grown adults. Contouring only gained popularity in the 2010s when the last millennials were in college. Now, a lot of the makeup Gen Z wears is meant to look natural, though you would never know it from watching Euphoria. But that doesn't change the fact that it's being piled on. One study showed that Gen Z has the highest percentage of regular makeup wearers than any generation, 36% compared to 34% of millennials. It might seem like a small difference, but traditionally makeup use increases with age. Women wear more to cover up fine lines, texture, and other so-called imperfections. Yet, ironically, it's the younger people who are wearing the most makeup today. A lot of the increase in makeup application knowledge and makeup use itself has to do with the explosion of beauty and makeup influencers on TikTok and YouTube, two platforms heavily used by Gen Z. Social media hasn't helped Gen Z's self-esteem either, leading to another surprising reason that they're looking older. But more on that later. Regardless of the reasons why, the demand for beauty products is skyrocketing over time. Online advertising company Nano found that beauty products demand grew 20% in the first part of 2023 compared to the same period in 2022. And a lot of that money is coming from Gen Z. According to Statista, the average Gen Zer spends $2,000 per year on beauty products. Considering how broke Gen Z tends to be, that is quite the amount. Generally contoured makeup and foundation is not only associated with older women, but accentuates even the smallest signs of aging. Foundation and other skin-covering makeup settle into facial lines, emphasizing them when viewed close up. On top of that, just wearing visible makeup can make young people seem older, not because of the makeup itself, but because we associate it with adulthood. A study in the British Journal of Psychology found that while makeup made women in their 40s and 50s look younger to observers, it had no effect on 30-year-olds, and it actually made 20-year-olds look older. Not to mention, many of the makeup techniques trending on TikTok are designed for the camera, not for real life. If you've ever swung by a film set, you'll know what looks flawless on screen can look, well, a little over the top in person. However, with the explosion of social media, selfies, and more on-camera lives, people are doing their makeup more for the screen rather than in-person interactions. So Gen Z is adopting makeup techniques originally designed for film and stage, like contouring and baking, a heavy layer of setting powder to lock everything in. The end result is makeup that looks flawless on camera, but way more noticeable in real life, making them appear even older. But there are more invasive cosmetic procedures aging Gen Z up as well. Dr. Sonia Khorana, a dermatology expert and cosmetic doctor, says that Gen Z is more likely to undergo cosmetic procedures at an earlier age than any other generation before them. Dr. Khorana works in England, where 41,000 Botox-style procedures were performed on teenagers in 2020. Eventually, the British government banned the use of Botox on anyone under the age of 18. It's not just a British thing. The American Society of Plastic Surgeons says that Botox injections increased 28% among people in their 20s between 2010 and 2020. That's partly because doctors around the world are marketing preventative Botox to young people who don't even have wrinkles yet. It's worth noting, though, that the evidence on that ranges from shaky to non-existent. According to the Washington Post, there haven't been any high-quality clinical trials to determine whether preventative Botox actually works long-term. It's still a relatively new trend, especially among people who are young enough to still be dealing with acne. They state that anecdotal evidence from dermatologists and plastic surgeons indicates that Botox does delay the onset of wrinkles. But they also point out that dermatologists and plastic surgeons who are selling Botox treatments to patients may not be the most reliable sources. When cosmetic interventions become obvious, they make people look older, partly because of, once again, social norms. No one expects a woman in her early 20s to have had extensive cosmetic procedures. That's exactly what happened when Kylie Jenner stepped out at Paris Fashion Week in 2024. Observers, some casually, others a bit more cruelly, remarked that she looked closer to her 40s than her actual age of 27. Jenner has opened up about getting lip fillers since she was 15, in addition to Botox, dermal fillers, and other plastic surgery interventions. Dr. Khurana explains that Gen Z's lifestyle choices can make them appear older than their actual age. And as you'll soon see, some of those habits, some you would never expect, are actually speeding up the aging process, and we'll get to those factors soon. In an interview with Vogue, dermatologists revealed that preventative Botox doesn't just influence social perceptions, it can actually make people look older. Manhattan dermatologist Patricia Wexler explains, if you do too much Botox on your forehead for many years, the muscles will get weaker and flatter. This doesn't just make the skin look thin, flat, and less vibrant, it can also cause new wrinkles to form in surrounding areas where they normally wouldn't. Most young people get preventative Botox in their forehead, but their face still wants to make expressions. Since the forehead muscles can't move as much, other muscles, like those around the nose, start to compensate, leading to wrinkles in places they were never meant to be. That creates wrinkles that normally wouldn't form until later in life, or at all, giving their face a prematurely aged appearance. While Botox is supposed to be spaced out by at least a few months, some people ignore that guideline, often with the help of shady doctors. This speeds up both the skin-weakening Botox causes as well as the wrinkles in the rest of their face. But why is Gen Z so obsessed with stopping aging to the point where they're actually making themselves look older in the process? Well, this brings us to another interesting point about Gen Z aging badly. Are they freaking out because they're aging badly? Or are they freaking out because they're aging? As opposed to other generations, Gen Z grew up with social media being a central part of their lives since before they hit puberty. Excessive use of social media led to a lot of Gen Zers comparing themselves to photoshopped and filtered photos of not only others but themselves as well. Experts have long warned about the filter effect and its impact on Gen Z's self-esteem. But that's only part of the story. Add to that Hollywood's obsession with injectables, fillers, and cosmetic procedures. The result is an army of eternally youthful, nearly identical faces that flood TikTok and Instagram, shaping what beauty is supposed to look like. Skincare company Curology conducted a study of 2,000 U.S. teenagers between the ages of 14 and 22. They found that 72% of teenagers feel pressured to look perfect because of social media's beauty standards. Furthermore, 25% of Gen Z say they're actually uncomfortable sharing their face on social media without filters or makeup as a result. In fact, a full 37% of teenagers would prefer to walk around with a facial filter on in real life. Not only are people on social media comparing themselves to others, but they're also comparing their faces with younger versions of themselves. Never before have so many people had immediate access to dozens or hundreds of chronologically sorted photos of their face. Scroll down your TikTok and Instagram feed over just a few years, and you can see a difference in your face over time. For some people, that's upsetting. After all, for most of human history, we weren't meant to regularly see ourselves at all. Plus, comparing your reflection to a 10-year-old oil painting in the Victorian era isn't exactly the same as spending 4 hours a day on Zoom and TikTok noticing your newly forming crow's feet. So it's very probable that due to those distorted perceptions and standards, Gen Z is just freaking out over normal signs of aging, rather than truly aging badly. Psychology professor Renee Anglin, the director of Body and Media Lab at Northwestern University, says, there is a sense in which young people have forgotten what faces look like. Research agrees with her, as 60% of 18 to 24-year-olds say they feel pressured to change their appearance. The problem is, when young people turn to cosmetic procedures to achieve an unrealistic look or to appear even younger, they often get the opposite effect. Just like with Botox, esthetician Dr. Ahmed El-Muntasser says, dermal fillers are brilliant for adding volume to the face, but too much filler can have the opposite effect, making you look older due to the shadows it can create on the face. Trying to contour the face with fillers instead of makeup can age otherwise young women. After a backlash to excessive filler use, many celebrities dissolved them, including Blac Chyna and Ariana Grande. They subsequently received widespread praise for how much better and younger they looked without them. Not to mention, the facial structure of women is still changing up until their mid-20s, as a lot of them haven't lost the baby fat covering their cheekbones. So staging cosmetic interventions when your underlying facial structure isn't even fully visible yet can create more problems. Fillers are likely to look odd or migrate after the face finishes undergoing its normal young adulthood changes. Belkin has this to say about filler. It is a great tool, but it has to be used well, and it has to be used smartly. When it migrates, it does create that exhausted look, which can make you look older. Gen Z's obsession with youth also leads to something called perception drift. Basically, when someone gets a little Botox here or a little filler there, they can start to freak out about other imperfections in their face. This can lead to more and more procedures until they look closer to a real housewife than to the office intern. Sari Botten, the editor of Oldster magazine, which unsurprisingly focuses on aging, thinks Gen Z's freakouts about getting older might have to do with psychological expectations as well. Members of Gen Z created a whole identity around youth, especially online, as many new generations tend to do. But social media amplified it. Trends on TikTok involved a lot of Gen Z and millennial comparisons, with Gen Z presenting their trends as new and exciting, while millennial trends were old and done for. But now Gen Alpha is here to overthrow them. Gen Z won't be the young generation the world markets to for much longer. They'll soon be the ones who don't get the new trends or be thought of as cringe. As Botten says, I think it's probably the old quarter-life crisis and the realization that they're going to have to make some big adult choices that they're going to have to live with. So, Gen Z's anxieties about adulthood are manifesting in feeling like they're looking too old. But according to at least one 26-year-old whose video about the topic went viral, all those anxieties are also making them look old. Jordan Howlett says he's constantly mistaken for being in his 40s, even though he's only 26. In a viral TikTok, he shared why he thinks this is happening. Anxiety and stress are prematurely aging his entire generation. That's right, one of the most serious things making Gen Z look old is stress. Gen Z is so worried about turning 30, that time when you're supposed to have everything put together, Howlett says. We live in a time nowadays where millennials look way younger for their age, while Gen Z looks way older for their age. One poll by the American Psychological Association found that 91% of 3,400 Gen Z adults surveyed in 2018 admitted that they'd experienced some kind of physical or emotional stress. Gen Z is also the most stressed out demographic in the workplace. A survey conducted by Cigna 360 found that of 12,000 workers, a whopping 98% reported burnout. And stress can have a very real physical effect on aging, as it affects cortisol, inflammation, hormonal levels, and skin mast cells. Cortisol slows down collagen production, making skin lose its elasticity. Inflammation helps create free radicals that damage cells by causing even more inflammation. And skin mast cells, which play a huge role in supporting the immune system, are badly damaged by stress. This leads to conditions like acne, psoriasis, and eczema, to name a few. So, what's the answer? Well, for a lot of Gen Z, the solution is simple. Skincare. Preventative skincare from as young as possible, all the time. Actually, as it turns out, that is probably aging them too. Gen Z really can't catch a break. The last time you logged on to TikTok and saw a 14-year-old describing their anti-wrinkle routine, you might have felt that there was something wrong with that picture. And as it turns out, it was a lot more than you think. Gen Z has been aggressively marketed to by skincare brands and influencers since they got their first hormones. But instead of the treatments that were usually marketed to teenagers, acne treatments for example, they're now getting wrinkle treatments and anti-aging routines pushed on them. And we mean pushed. Bubble Skincare, which sells products like eye brightening cream, has over 2,000 13 and 14-year-old youth ambassadors. It's common to see influencers in their sophomore year of high school showing multi-step morning and nighttime skincare routines on social media. But not only is all of the skincare mostly unnecessary at such a young age, it can actually be damaging. Retinol, a common ingredient in many anti-aging treatments, isn't recommended for young skin because it causes dryness. While it's great for rejuvenating collagen production in older people, young people don't need that rejuvenation. Their bodies are pretty great at producing collagen on their own. So instead, they end up with dry-looking dehydrated skin that ages them. The ingredient also damages the skin barrier over time, and that can help cause conditions like dermatitis. Chemical exfoliants have similar effects. As Dr. Khurana says, There's peer pressure to try the products influencers are promoting on social media, but these often aren't suitable for those under 30. So what skincare does Gen Z need? According to most dermatologists, probably nothing more than a good SPF, a cleanser, and a moisturizer. But that won't stop skincare companies from convincing Gen Z that they need their treatments to avoid looking old, and Gen Z from buying it all up. Research shows that Gen Z spends more on beauty and skincare than any other demographic, even though they need it the least. Unfortunately, even though Gen Z seems to focus on their facial skincare routine, they seem to care less about the rest of their body. A study carried out by Melanoma Focus found that 43% of Gen Z admitted to using sunbeds, one of the worst things you can do for your skin. Not only does it drastically increase the risk of skin cancer, but it also speeds up premature aging, leaving skin looking older faster. As Seattle-based dermatologist Dr. Heather Rogers says of Gen Z, they're not taking care of their skin despite having a 15-step skincare regimen. Tanning bed use steeply declined in the 2010s by almost 30% after science showed that sunbeds were even worse for skin than tanning in the actual sun. So why is the anti-wrinkle obsessed generation tanning their skin to a leathery hide? Well, it's because they don't seem to be aware of how bad it is. And disinformation coming through influencers on social media has played a big part in that. The backlash against tanning was huge amongst millennials. If you saw orange-tinted MySpace profile pictures circa 2004, you would understand why. But Gen Z has swung back in the opposite direction. Many now believe the concerns over tanning beds are overhyped. The American Academy of Dermatology conducted a survey in 2022 that showed Gen Z knew less about UV safety than older generations. In fact, 1/3 of Gen Z respondents scored a D or lower in their knowledge of sun protection. Even those who know the risks don't seem to care much. It highlights a bigger issue. Gen Z's perpetually online culture may have made them more focused on controlling how they look on social media than on their actual health. A full 28% of Gen Z respondents said that getting a tan was more important than not getting skin cancer. We assume that the people who actually got skin cancer would disagree with that statement. Unfortunately, skin cancer still follows the rules of science rather than the advice of TikTok influencers. One doctor says at this point in his practice, he is removing skin cancer from someone under 40 almost every week. Surgical oncologist Dr. Rajesh Nair says, "We're seeing an increasing number of young and middle-aged adults with not only skin cancers, but advanced stage skin cancers." Other dermatologists agree that influencers sharing flat-out false information about UV rays and tanning salons doesn't help the situation. Dr. Jacqueline Watchmaker, who works at U.S. Dermatology Partners, says, "I definitely have seen some 20-year-olds who come in not only tan, but red-brown. They're so tan, I call it mahogany. When your tan matches your grandma's dining room table, perhaps it's time to stop." Celebrities with huge media followings like Kristen Cavallari have posted videos claiming they don't wear sunscreen because it's not natural. Some even insist that sunscreen, not UV rays, is the real cause of skin cancer. Dermatologists strongly disagree. There is literally no evidence to support that claim, and every peer-reviewed study says the exact same thing. But a lot more Gen Zers get their health guidance from TikTok. So what doctors say doesn't really matter. According to the Orlando Health Cancer Institute, 1 in 7 adults in the U.S. under 35 think daily sunscreen is worse than direct sun exposure. Unfortunately, UV rays are not the only carcinogen making Gen Z look like they're on their second mortgage. A sad irony, as in this economy they're probably not even going to get a first one. And young people seem really misinformed about this next cancer-causing habit as well, perhaps explaining why it might be the worst cause of premature aging yet: vaping. Anti-smoking campaigns have been so successful that the percentage of American adults who smoke dropped from 42.6% in 1965 to just 11.6% in 2022, a 73% decrease, according to the American Lung Association. But as smoking declined, so did tobacco company profits. And as they watched their revenue shrink, alongside a suspicious rise in healthy lungs, they came up with a new plan. They invested in and promoted vaping instead. Big Tobacco didn't disappear, it just rebranded. British American Tobacco, the company behind Views, remains a major player in the e-cigarette market. Meanwhile, Altria, the owner of Philip Morris and the maker of Marlboro, once held a 35% stake in Juul before shifting its focus to Enjoy, another vaping company. Altria's new slogan is "Moving Beyond Smoking." They just conveniently left out that it's toward vaping instead. And Gen Z has latched on to these campaigns. One University College London study showed that between 2016 and 2023, the percent of 18 to 24-year-olds in England that inhaled nicotine products rose from 28% to 35%. E-cigarettes that were initially intended as a way to wean former smokers off of nicotine are now being picked up by people who never had a cigarette smoking habit to begin with. The marketing of flavored vapes has made them wildly popular with a group that was never supposed to buy nicotine in the first place: children. And worst of all, flavored e-cigarettes have an even safer reputation than regular ones. A survey found that 27% of Gen Z believes flavored vapes are less harmful to their health than standard e-cigarettes. Meanwhile, the reality is concerning. 17% of parents with kids aged 9 to 17 reported that their child had tried e-cigarettes, and 7% said their child uses them regularly. And that is just the parents who know their children are vaping. Take a minute to think about how much your parents don't know about your teenage years, and then realize how many more teenagers are actually vaping. Smoking is one of the leading causes of rapid aging, and vaping isn't any better when it comes to creating those fine lines and wrinkles, and generally making the skin duller and less elastic. So those are just a few reasons why, on some college campuses, it's getting harder to tell the students from the professors. From over-the-top beauty routines to skyrocketing stress levels, tanning beds, and preventative Botox gone wrong, Gen Z's approach to self-care might actually be aging them faster. But what do you think? Are these factors really making Gen Z look older? Or is it all just social media exaggeration? Let us know in the comments. In the meantime, check out Every Generation Explained in 10 minutes, or click on this one instead.